everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Gosvick, your host. My guest today is Roman Wyden. Roman is a podcast host. He's created a documentary and is writing a book, all titled ADHD Is Over. When I heard the title of all of his things, I wondered what in the world he meant by that. Did he mean that ADHD does not exist? Does he mean it's not real? That's not at all what he means. We had a really good conversation about this. And, diagnoses are hard. I have dealt with this with one of my children. There are benefits and there are things that cause detriment when a child is diagnosed. We talked about all of that. We talked about the love for our children and our families and what is most important. I'm very impressed with his research and the work that he has put in and the way he's helping parents and teachers and kids and people when it comes to ADHD and other diagnoses. This is a great conversation. If you know of a teacher or a student or a parent or someone who might benefit from this conversation, I ask you to send this to them after you listen, and also check out all of his stuff. He's got some really great things going on. Thanks for being here. Thanks so much for talking to me. I thought, your subject, I don't want to say it's controversial, but I just bet you get a lot of pushback from people. I just imagine I've worked in a school and I've seen, you know, ADHD diagnoses in kids, and you see those kids everywhere that just can't be still, and they can't, they've got, it's a real problem. And so I thought, I wonder if he gets a lot of parents complaining to him about what he does. But you've written a book. You are doing a documentary, right?
Yep.
And you have a podcast called ADHD Is Over. So I am so interested to find out why this subject is so important to you and what you talk about on your podcast.
Great. Yeah. So basically, the inspiration for ADHD is over, the title.
Mhm.
Some call it clickbait, but really it's not. It isn't, because it was based on the Yoko Ono, John Lennon campaign called War is Over in the 60s. And they had put up these billboards and newspaper articles saying war is over if we want it. And I thought, well, I feel similarly about ADHD. It's not that it's ever going to be over.
Right.
We'd have to declare it for ourselves. Is it over for me and my family, or me and my child? And we can get more into what that means, that it's over. But I wanted to create a declaration from the future. And then, of course, the subtitle of my book is "The Struggle is Real, the Label is Not," meaning that the struggles that these children and adults have interacting with their environment, the world, those struggles are real. The label was made up. It was voted on by 15 individuals years ago. And so we have to just be very clear what is what. We have to dissect it if we really want to get to the root of it. So that's how I started. That's how the name became ADHD Is Over, declaring that from the future.
And this all started with your son, correct? You had a son that was diagnosed with that, or that's what they wanted to diagnose him with.
Exactly. My son Kai, who's now almost 17, almost 10 years ago when he was 7, we had him diagnosed. And ever since then, I've been researching it because I wasn't very satisfied with the diagnosis. And it's not that I wasn't satisfied with the diagnosis on paper or with the credibility of the expert. I just intuitively, it didn't fit. It didn't,
Right.
resonate with me. So I had to uh, research. I had to dig deeper. And it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
It's tricky with those diagnoses because, on one hand, I have a son with autism and he was diagnosed at 5. And on one hand, the diagnosis is good because it gets you services, it gets you things that you need. On the other hand, you don't want that to be what defines your child. And so it's kind of a tricky balance, for parents. So what did you do when you said you didn't want that diagnosis? You wanted to be a disorder-free environment for your home. How did you handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question because I get this a lot from parents, right? And the underlying question is always like, well, you could, but I'm sure we can't, right? People sort of go like, I'm sure, and maybe you can't, right? But what we did is, and by the way, I part of the diagnosis was ADHD, but also autism and then
Mhm.
dyslexia, and there was like 6 of them total.
Wow.
And that's why I was like, that's not my child. Like,
Yeah.
did we swap diagnosis reports here with some other child, right? So that's how it started. But anyway, I just wanted to say that. So we decided to do more research into ADHD, and sort of early on, we found a few books and um, studies and just things that reflected for me that, oh, okay, well, before you label, before you get access to services and stuff, really make sure you want to go down that route. There's no right or wrong. And I came across a study, and I don't have it in front of me. It's in my book. It was about labels causing more harm than good in the long run when we look forward to them being adults. And
Right.
this sort of jumping ahead creates psychological, um, call it other struggles like anxiety, severe insecurity, fear, whatever, because they've started identifying with the diagnosis, and so that they think that they're that kind of person. And, let's face it, anything called a disorder doesn't have an empowering energy behind it. It's disempowering, you
Yeah.
know? We can argue all we want. Anything that is a special education plan, it's the outcast, there are certain things, but again, there's no right or wrong. So we just decided, we said, look, let's look at everything else first. And the school was number one. Is this the right school for our child? Not the right school we think he should be at, not the
Yeah.
perfect feeder school to an Ivy League track. Is this a school where our son Kai can go to, that he enjoys going to, and that he has more peace than stress? And the answer was clearly no. And so
Mm.
we changed schools, and it's rough because you get a lot of pushback. Parents are like, well, you shouldn't change. He's changed schools probably 6 times in his life so far.
Wow.
Um, and I will just say for our listeners that, they're always worried, like, is my child going to turn out okay? Well, Kai's doing well. He's doing a year of high school in Ecuador with his mom right now.
Wow.
He had 2 jobs before he left. He made money. He was a busser. They loved him.
Yeah.
He has a great social life. He's no longer hyperactive or more impulsive than a 17-year-old is, probably less than I am. And, so it turned out in a way, and of course there's so much life ahead, but my point is that by changing schools, we removed, and you'll hear me say this a lot, we removed the maximum amount of stress out of his
Right.
and our environment. And then we have to go to everything else, food, the obvious food, screens, being closer to nature and so forth. But the most important one, to be honest, looking back, besides school, was my marriage, was my lack of presence as a father emotionally. I
Mm.
just didn't know. I didn't have that modeled in my life. So I couldn't really be there for my child. And neither was his mother. She wouldn't mind me saying this, that she was a bit of a workaholic. That gave her value. And so it was our first child, and we were just so busy, and we had like childcare, and we constantly were running around. And I was talking to Dr. Gabor Mate, who I had the pleasure of interviewing, and he said,
Mm.
you can never be absolutely sure what caused it, what is the one cause, because it's not one
Right.
cause. But he said most likely that, and he had a rough birth. Those two things create this sense of unsafety in a child. And when they feel unsafe, they need to check out because this moment isn't safe, right? So it becomes a coping mechanism. And so, in a nutshell, uh, looking at the marriage, and eventually we divorced, and and there's so much more harmony and peace and love right now in our co-parenting and in our family. We're still a family than before. And I take responsibility for my end for sure. And it, that's what it takes. It takes looking at every area of life, flipping it upside down before we still can decide to do the label and the medication, all that. That's fine. There's no judgment. But
Right.
in our case, there was no need because we started to see him calm down. His tics went away. He wasn't as hyperactive anymore. He learned how to read playing Pokemon cards because
Oh, well.
the school he was at, there was no homework and no grades, and that freaks parents out. They're like, "Oh my God,
Right.
how's my child gonna learn anything?" Well, guess what? When they're given the opportunity to choose what they want to learn, they will learn
Yeah.
it. Because at some point, you have to know how to read or write.
Sure.
It shows up in life. And
Yeah.
if you're interested in something and you're like, "I can't play this game unless I know how to read," you will read. So, or learn to read. So those are the main things. And then we just kept looking at everything else. Like As I always say, it's not trauma, although I'd like to call it trauma, but it's really stress
Yeah.
that impacts a child's nervous system that causes stress responses and coping mechanisms. And the more stress we can remove, and it's the same. Look, autism, Asperger's, the whole spectrum is a spectrum of um, how intensely stressed a system is, right?
Yeah.
Autism is more stressed than ADHD per se, and so forth. And so it's kind of like I'm not an expert in autism. I have lots of friends with autistic kids, and I love them. They're smart, they're awesome, they're funny. Um, but it's a similar thing. Like a vaccine can be a stressor. I know that's controversial, but a school can be a stressor.
Right.
For example, my son. I'm sure you can relate to similar things. When he was little, we at some point had on a polo shirt with two buttons, and we tried to take it off over his head, and it got stuck. It almost
Oh, wow.
he felt like he was choking.
Yeah.
Well, he was probably 3 or 4, and since then, up until he was 15, he wouldn't wear anything with buttons. And of
Mhm.
course, all my friends are like, well, yeah, he's autistic. I mean, of course, right? It's the thing. It's the tactile, whatever weirdness. And I was always like, well, maybe I don't know, but let's wait. If he wears sweatpants for the rest of his life and he's comfortable, hey.
Right.
But at 15, right before he started high school, he was like, Dad, I want to get some jeans. And I was like, well, they most of them have buttons. He's like, it's okay. So we tried them on, and then like a year later, he's like, I want to get a polo shirt. He loved the Ralph Lauren polo,
Oh,
and I was like, they have buttons. He's like, it's fine. So now it's gone, right? So
yeah.
again, some people might say, well, you don't know how bad it is for us. It's different. Yeah, it's always different. But giving it time is another, these are phases in our children's lives. And again, depending on how severely stressed a human system was, it's going to take longer. It's going to take more support. And recently somebody told me they have an autistic son, and he said something about, yeah, he's way behind. And I said, no, he's on his own time.
Right.
He's going to do what he's going to do. And you may have to support him longer but what a gift that you get to be there
Right.
longer. Right. So that's kind of how I look at it. And without judging anyone else's story, right? I don't know your story, but
Yeah.
someone else's story.
I love that. Oh, and I'm sure you've heard back from parents. I would think that you've heard back from a lot of parents. What do you say to those parents who say, I can't do that. I can't move my kid to another school. I can't,
Yeah.
what do you say to those people?
Uh, it's not what they like to hear. I'm a big believer where there's a will, there's a way,
Yeah.
because there's scholarships, there's co-ops, there's homeschooling for a while, there's tutors that are affordable. There really there's so many opportunities to take it on,
Sure.
but it takes a lot of work. So I get that. So if somebody says I can't do it right now, totally cool. Even if parents say, well, I have to medicate because I'm a single mom, I have 3 jobs, I can't
Right.
afford to go into the principal's office 3 times a week. I can't. I'm burned out. I get it. Medication, I always say that could be your band-aid, or to stay at the same school another
Right.
year. Have it be a band-aid, like a temporary fix, but in the background, in parallel, start doing the research, the work, put it out there. And I'm getting spiritual here, but whether you believe in God or universe, if you start asking, like, show me some people and schools and ways where I can make this happen, please, and pray every day. And like somehow energetically, I do believe that things will show up and line up. That's how it happened for us. It was a school that there was no room. They didn't let anyone in. It was such a small school.
Yeah.
Somehow magically it opened up.
Yeah. I mean, prayer has been such a huge part of our son's life. And my husband works in healthcare. And so there were a lot of things that he thought about that I didn't think about as far as, when his body chemistry was changing, we were praying, certain things for him just because we wanted him to have the best opportunity possible to succeed. And I mean, he's amazing. He will live with us probably forever, but, he's doing really well, and so it's a journey. It
Yeah.
definitely is a journey, and you do have to take in every single factor. I mean, there's just so many things, but if you want the best for your child, you're gonna do that. You're gonna do what you
Yeah.
can.
And you said the perfect word, right? It's a journey. Like there's a reason you have your son in your life. Like I believe that for anyone out there, like my son came into like my life, or me and my co-parents' life. In a way, it was almost like a wedge inserted into our lives, and it was basically saying what it was saying. It was like, slow down, pay attention,
Yeah.
like really clean up your messes, like, put your own house in order first before you go out there. demonstrating or whatever you're doing. Just
Right.
really like look at everything, right? And so for you or for another parent, if somebody listening has a similar situation, it's kind of like it's the hand we've been dealt. Like
Mhm.
that's your hand, right? Your son,
Right.
you may, I'm not saying you, but somebody listening may say, but I don't want it, or it's too much, or I can't. Well, guess what? There's a reason for it. Like I always say, an ADHD diagnosis is like a check engine light in a family.
Right.
You don't put a piece of duct tape over it, hoping that the car will keep running. You open the hood and you go,
Yeah.
"What's not working?" And why do I have a car that's not working? Why am I so unlucky? It's like, well, it doesn't have anything to do with luck. You just have a car that's not working well. So look under the hood or
Sure.
analyze maybe in your case, your son, if you said he might be living with you forever, there's going to be so many gifts in that structure if that ends up being what it is, right?
Yeah.
There's so much growth, so much like insight and love, and you're going to expand as a human. Your husband will, and your son. It really is a gift. I do believe that.
I totally agree with you. There are so many people that we've met along the way that we never would have met otherwise. We've learned to celebrate things other parents may not ever think are a very big deal, but we've learned to celebrate those. My son, he's not a conversationalist, I'll say that, but sometimes he says the funniest things because you just don't know what's gonna come out of his mouth. So, he's very
Yeah.
funny, he's fun to be with, and, there are so many blessings and things to celebrate that, I have 2 other children that are it's just very different with them than
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
with him.
But it's like there's no normal. We
Right,
compare everything to a normal brain or a normal this. Like
yeah.
he is at 29, how he is at 29.
Right,
And if we want to compare him to other kids at 29, then we're doing a disservice to everyone involved. And
absolutely. I
instead of
agree
just
with that.
supporting him right where he's at. And so that's
Yeah.
beautiful that you guys, are those kind of parents. So.
Absolutely. What myths or misunderstandings do people have or parents have about ADHD that you feel like are kind of damaging families?
It's a good question. So in my book, I have a chapter called The Five Half Truths About ADHD.
Mm.
Because a half truth is very sneaky. It's almost worse than a lie because it's like saying, the first
Sure.
part is true. And then
Mhm.
because the listener believes that knows that the first part is true, then if the second part is a lie, they will buy that lie and also assume it's true because it's part of the same statement, right?
Right.
So, for example, the big one, because you asked about impacting families and it all impacts them, right? But the biggest one is when we hear that it's genetic. That's not
Right.
true. That's not
Yeah.
true. And I'm not saying this because I'm a denier. There's no science. First of all, there's no ADHD gene or a combination.
Right.
It's not genetic in a traditional sense, meaning genetic would mean that it's predetermined, that you can't change it. And so then parents feel like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. Right? He got it from his dad, right? So in a way, you lose your power there, and
Yeah.
also responsibility because you're like, well, there's nothing I can do. So I'm gonna give the power to the psychiatrist or the drug, for example.
Right.
So how it actually is handed down, which is tons of research I've done and experts I've interviewed. So the biologist Bruce Lipton told me in an interview that he's in the science of epigenetics.
Mhm.
Epigenetics basically proves that the environment, right? So anything in our environment like school, stress,
Right.
parenting, whatever, anything external that impacts the nervous system, the brain,
Mhm.
can turn on or off a gene. So meaning
Right.
you may have a gene, and this is not, there's no ADHD gene, but there's, for example, they're talking about this thing called the sensitivity gene.
Mhm.
So let's just use that as an example. If you have that gene, it is not guaranteed that it will be turned on. It's the environment that could turn it on by something that
Gotcha.
happened, right? So
Yeah.
then you're at most you're ever only uh, uh, disposed. You're never
Right.
predetermined. So that gives the power back to parents. It's like, oh, so if I remove stress from the environment and if I do the best I can to create peace and harmony and love and authenticity in our family, then our child might be sensitive because they have the
Yes.
sensitivity gene, but they're not going to react in a way that will then be judged as with a disorder of like ADHD,
Right.
or OCD, or anxiety, depression,
Yeah.
right? Because the environment has helped to not have that gene be turned on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't like it when people assume, they just jump right on that, well, if he's autistic, then he can't do any of these things or he can't be around. And you don't know. It just like every child is different. Every child with that diagnosis is different.
Yeah, yeah,
My son, he used to love to go to Chuck E. Cheese. And you would think that would be way too much stimulation for him. It's
yeah.
too much stimulation for me. There's so many noises and things, but he somehow he could do it, he loved it, and anyway, I think a lot of people, not even parents, kind of assume or presume things about kids with diagnosis that are not necessarily true.
Yeah.
So I agree with all of that, what you just said.
Yeah, well, that's another, right, reason why labels can be very harmful,
Right.
because I've talked to now hundreds of adults. I never say some people are like, I've interviewed thousands of people. I'm like, well, maybe if you have 1,000 episodes, but I have like 250. So I can say hundreds of adults, also on the side, just in real life, right, that all have struggled with the insecurity the most. So
Yeah.
they were on medications, they were labeled, and maybe they got their college degree and now they're working somewhere and they're young adults in their 20s or 30s, and yet they're insecure people. Why? Well, guess what? Insecure, this is great because I recently discovered this for myself,
Mhm.
um, which is again this wordplay. I can't think of the word. Oh, semantics. Yeah.
Oh,
So, so what I was doing is like, wait, insecure basically means unsafe. You don't feel secure, meaning
right.
you don't feel safe. Well, how come? Well, if you're always dependent on an external substance or structure or person to feel that you're whole, that you're
Yeah.
worthy, right? That becomes your self-image. You're now the disordered, labeled, and you may be like, no, it's my superpower. I love that sentence, but it's so often used to cover up still the insecurity and the like. I know something wrong with me. I know I have ADHD. My brain's kind of broken, and but it's my superpower. But I just feel like if we just looked at that and said, look, is that empowering the person to know?
Right.
Um, to put them in that category. It's different. It's a little different for autism than it is for ADHD because
Yeah.
off ADHD can be highly functioning. You'd never know, right? Whereas
Right.
autistic kids in certain environments or school or whatever, if they have a more severe case of autism, it's not highly functioning. You have to
Right.
sort of have a structure, and so I get that. So I'm just speaking in this case mostly for ADHD, where I just feel it can do more harm than good when we label a young child. An adult is different. Somebody at 25 saying, "Oh my God, I got diagnosed as an adult." I'm like, "Hey, great. Just know what you're taking on now as a label.
Right.
Know what you're dealing with, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
You're an adult, right?" But a 4 or 5 year old,
It's hard.
oof, yeah.
It's hard. Um, do you talk to like, school teachers or administrators or anybody working how do you help them do what you're doing in their environment with the kids?
It's really hard, and
Yeah,
I'll tell you why. First of all, a lot of them are in the system, right? The system is the system.
right.
They're not mean people or ignorant people or unintelligent. They're very intelligent people. Um, it's hard for me because the work I do is really questioning everything they've been told to reiterate,
Yeah,
right? What I try to do is there's a couple teachers recently that have asked for my book. At my son's school, I went to distribute some copies, and I will do more of that. And it's a little bit more like, hey, if anything in there sparks something or changes your mind or not or inspires you, great.
right.
But generally, those are my findings.
Yeah,
And school is kind of where we try to fit the round pegs into the square holes. And I'm not here to change that system, but it will change. I think
yeah,
we're gonna create environments where you fit whatever shape peg into its hole, its right hole, right?
yeah.
Um, so the teaching will be more customized and more, for lack of a better word, just more evolved. And so in the meantime, I get a lot of pushback from teachers. I get a lot of pushback from parents, and I always say, look, if this doesn't resonate with you, I totally get it.
Yeah,
Like I don't push my religion or my specific gym on anyone and say my gym's better than your gym.
right.
Check out my gym. If you like it, you like it. If it's too many windows or too many
Right.
this, it's not your gym. So yeah, teachers and principals have been very skeptical.
Yeah,
Um, and I've yet to hear feedback from the recent handouts of the books, but I think I will get a few people to respond. And I'm always open for criticism or adding things or whatever. So yeah.
Sure. It's so difficult. I worked in a school for 5 years. I did not wanna be a teacher, but
Yeah.
I did work in a school for 5 years. I was the librarian, and it was interesting for me to have a perspective from that side because had raised my son and was in our meetings all the time and changing IEPs and all, for his entire school career. And so I did write a book on, our journey with autism, and I talked about it in the book how as a parent, you want and expect everything that your child needs. You want it and expect it. And if it's in his IEP, they're supposed to do it. On the other side, working in the school, I saw how difficult it was for teachers to be able to do everything that they have to do. And there's some things that are required, but there's just so many factors in a school day of
Yeah.
distractions and kids who need help for different things. I mean, there's just so much going on. And I really had a lot of compassion for the teachers then just because I could see, but I also, got it from the parent's perspective. You want your kid to get everything that
Yeah.
they need. So
Yeah.
it's such a hard balance right now,
I
for
agree.
for all of them, for everybody.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. When you look at the school system, the system you were in, the parents on one hand, like you said, they want everything for their child. They want them to be taught. They want them to be
Right.
supported. And if you have an IEP, they want the services available.
Yeah.
They want to be respected and so forth. And then you have the teachers, right, or the staff
Mhm.
that has their limitations or even personal limitations at times. They're burnt out. They have too many students in the classroom, right? So it's the system that's not allowing us, and in this case, me, to come in and say, here's what we could do. Because what I suggest in my book, it's like everything needs an overhaul.
Yeah.
The education system needs an overhaul, and it's going to get it. I would say, the resistance of the bigger systems
Mhm.
are going to result in breakdowns. So in other words, they could have changed it along the way, starting a long time ago, and we would now be transitioning. But because we've
Right.
refused it, it's going to crash,
Yeah.
and it's going to happen with all our systems that are essentially creating disempowerment and dependence. Dependence is a big word because
Yeah.
it's something I always stress is that parents need to become independent, responsible guides for their children and really do the
Absolutely.
research, You really gotta dig deep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing you talked about was conscious parenting. What is
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, it's very simple, right? It's this big buzz term, like it's a conscious parent, and what does that mean? You go to Burning Man and you like incense and you do breath work and you have your like henna tattoos. No, a conscious parenting is really that. It's being aware as you can as a parent every moment of your day, right? It's hard because we're so
Yeah.
torn apart with work, and we're ripped over here with this responsibility and that, church and this and that. And so really slowing down has been my biggest lesson recently. And
Yeah.
by slowing down, we can be more aware of what a child needs, not what we think they need or they should do.
Right.
And by the way, I'm just insert this really cool story that I'll make it short. I recently read a post of this psychologist on Instagram, and I don't remember her name, but and she said, you've probably heard of the TV show or the series Adolescence that came out in Britain. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
Uh-uh.
it's really cool creatively because every episode is done in one camera move for like
Oh,
45
wow.
minutes. It's amazing. But it basically was pointing the finger at like, oh, technology, media, the internet is responsible for a lot of the bullying and the violence, right?
Right.
And everybody's, "Oh my god, yes, it's true, it's true, it's true." So there's a lot of controversy about that, and recently, the psychologist said, "Look, it's not about the media and the technology and the devices. It is the mental state that your
Mhm.
child is in when they log on to these devices."
Right.
And so that's when I went like, yes, wow, she gets it
Yeah.
because I believe the same thing. It's like it's what we do as parents, right? When we are aware, conscious parents, where we go, you know what, something's off with my son. Like I need to sit with him, and it's not like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? They don't open up that way. You know that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go to we have this athletic club here that we are members of, and I used to take my 16-year-old Kai to the hot tub there at night because I knew that when he was in warm water and he was just relaxing, suddenly he was like, Dad, can I just say something about something that happened? And I was like, yeah, sure, right? It was no big deal. Suddenly it all came out. And so
Yeah.
that's what I mean by, like, be aware of how your child likes to be open like a flower, right? They need to be
Sure.
open so the emotions come out and the stories get shared. And to me, that's where we can slow down and actually have them feel seen and heard and loved. And then a video game is just a video game. It's like, yeah, I'm bored. I'll play with my friends for a while. I'm having fun. Great. They're not going to go out and shoot people just because they're
Right.
watching shooter games.
Right.
That comes from the internal
Mhm.
mental state, I believe.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So if a parent is listening and their child just got diagnosed with ADHD, what is one piece of advice you could give to them?
Perfect. I'm glad you asked. It's very simple. My book was going to be called, instead of ADHD is Over, and here's the advice: ADHD is not an emergency.
Ah,
That was going to be the title. And what
yeah,
that means is that take a deep breath, take another one, take a couple of weeks, do some research, listen to as many people as you can that believe that it's not a disorder, and listen to as many people as you can that believe it is a disorder, and
okay,
start making a list of uh, what I call narratives. It's genetic. I don't think it's genetic. And then sit with that. And always say, like, our intuition is the connection to source, to God. That's my belief. And if we can sit with that and go, so what are we gonna do as a family? And then talk to your, obviously, your spouse or partner, family, like, take
okay,
2, 3, 4 weeks. If you need to finish the school year, if they let you, without medicating, without labeling yet, if you can, finish the school year, right? But really, there's no reason to rush. There really isn't, for 99 or 98% of the time. It's giving you the opportunity to reflect, and again, to be conscious and aware of what sort of track you want to go down, you know?
right. That's good. That's very good. We've talked about a whole lot of things. We've talked about a lot of stuff. Is there anything that I have not asked you about that you want to talk to me about?
Not really. I like to just always say, again, to parents listening, like, if you're here, if you're listening to the Life Stories podcast, or the parents listening to my podcast, or any podcast on mental health or family education, you're already a conscious parent because you're already
Right.
curious, right? You
Okay.
you want to grow, and I'll leave you. This is actually perfect because I wrote this down right before we started. I was listening to Wayne Dyer on the way home from going on a hike with my dog, and he said that Abraham Maslow was one of his teachers, or gurus, and he said this one thing. He said, "There's certain people in life
Mhm.
um, that just need to self-realize. They just need to become better people." And I'm relating that to the parent here that wants to become a better parent, right?
Right.
And he says, "What one can be, one must be." So I believe that the parents listening to this really feel a need to become better parents because they just must. It's in their, I'd hate to say DNA, we just talked about genetics, but as a metaphor, it's in their DNA. They're like, I
Yeah.
must become a better parent. So I just wanted to acknowledge yourself, the people listening, and any parent that wants to become a better parent, for having that driver, and that's going to make a better world.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to share this with people, and I wanna point out your book because I think people, like you said, need to look at all sides. And we are so inundated with information. It's a good thing and it's not a good thing that there's
Yeah.
just so much information out there. But it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be, like you said, it's not an emergency.
It's not,
It
and
could
I
be a
have it here. I'll show you. This is the cover. ADHD is Over, and I will say it's 150 pages. It's $18. If I had this available 10 years ago,
right.
I would have bought it 10 times over, because it's like I needed that wedge inserted between the diagnosis and the first
Sure.
action. You need a little bit of a wedge to breathe. So
Yeah, and you need to hear it from somebody that's been there, and so that's why I think that's so important, so
yeah,
well,
thank you.
thank you for being a guest today, I appreciate you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Alrighty, I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.